This is Can I Laugh on Your Shoulder? Man, welcome to the show, Amy Center. Amy, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited. This has been on our calendar for like a long time. Like we had to reschedule a few times. I mean, it's been, so this is like, it's been a long time coming, but okay, sorry. I am gonna have to sing a Taylor Swift song. It's been a long time coming. And so I'm just very grateful to finally have you here. So we're not going to waste any time. And I'm going to have you give us the Amy 101. So tell us who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are.
Okay. Well, I've recently found out we grew up like right next to each other.
Yes, which is like real fun. We both came from Northern Virginia, and
Yes, I
did
grew
you
up in,
ever go to you grew up in Sterling?
yeah, I grew up in Sterling, and I think you just said on a recent podcast that you turned 40 or about to turn 40. I just turned 40 last year,
Okay, so like what year did you graduate high school?
2002.
Okay, so you were a year ahead of me in high school. I love this. Did you ever like I just am like we had to have like run into
I
each
know,
other at
like we
some
didn't
point.
know each other, but surely we were at the Herndon Festival getting down with the local bands and
100% we were both at the Herndon Festival. Yeah, I lived in walking distance of the Herndon Festival. So everybody would
it was
always
so
like park
awesome.
at our house and then we would
Yes,
walk. Did
we
you
would
ever
park
eat
at
at
your
Tortilla
house.
Factory?
Yes,
Yeah, probably.
girl.
Yes. Okay, so the tortilla. Can we just have a moment? Okay, everyone, you
I
just
don't
get to
live there
listen to Amy.
anymore, but I like that you know all the places that I know.
Who didn't know the Tortilla Factory? May it
Did
rest
you go to
in
Bowl
peace.
America every Saturday?
Absolutely. Well, I was telling my kids this. I was like, they were like, "What did you do when you were a kid?" And I was like, like either Friday or Saturday night, we would go to the bowling
It
alley
was
because
the
that was like
best.
that was what people did. I mean, I'm
And then when
just
we got
oh
older, they came up with the, what do you call it? Like the nighttime, like it's like
yeah,
a
like the glow
nightclub.
in the dark. Yeah,
Yes. And you like
glow in the
felt so
dark.
cool and they like dropped the beat and the lights and it was like, oh, I'm in high school. I'm so cool at the bowling alley.
Yes. And what about Reston Town Center? Did you go to Reston Town
Yeah.
Center?
We still go. I
Okay.
visit my family out there and we go there ice skating every Christmas. And yes, all the same things. This is awesome.
Wait, hold on. So Amy, so I worked one of my first jobs in high school was I was a skate guard at the Reston Town.
I was there.
Wait, it gets
Busting a
better.
move.
Okay. It gets better. So I was a skate guard at the Reston Town Center ice skating rink. When I got the job, I did not know how to ice skate. But my friend worked there and they were like, "We need skate guards." And I was like, "Sure." So I got a job as a skate guard at the Reston Town Center skating rink. I mean, I very quickly like
What's a
learned how to
skate
skate.
guard?
You know, like the people that work there that skate around and
You
like
help the people
who
that fall?
and yes, and I didn't know how
And
to
you didn't know
skate.
you had to fall to get to them.
Also, at 16 years old, drove the Zamboni. Like who thought this was a good idea to allow a 16-year-old to drive the Zamboni to clean the
Oh, the
ice?
like cleaner thing?
Yeah, like
My gosh.
that big thing. They needed somebody to do it, and I had really a lot of driving experience. It's a long story, and I was like, I think I can do it. And so my boss was like, "You've got one shot. Like, don't screw this up." And I ended up doing a great job. And so then my boss was like, "All right, you get to drive the Zamboni now." I was like, winning. But then, Amy, it gets better. Okay. So then, you know how every Christmas, like it was a big deal, like they would do the big Christmas parade and then Santa would light the Christmas tree and then you could get pictures with Santa at the skating rink at Reston Town Center. Well, I guess like the guy who had usually been Santa, like, I don't know what happened. There was some sort of like hullabaloo and that Santa ended up being a bad Santa or something. And so
Oh, I know. I want to know that story.
So the Reston Town Center Santa from the years of like 1999 to 2001, I think maybe those years, it would not have been 2002, but definitely 99 to 2001 was my father. So if
That's
anyone has a
awesome.
picture of themselves with Santa from the Reston Town Center Santa, in 1999 to 2001, that is my dad. So
I was gonna
there you
say,
go.
I wish I did, but I think we went to the Dallas Town Center Mall for our Santa pics.
Oh man, get Blimpie. Man, the food court. Okay, we are reminiscing. We could do this the entire time. This is really fun. And
We
again,
need a
I really
90s
feel like,
soundtrack.
yes, this is the most knees like, oh my gosh, what did we do? We went to the bowling alley. We went and we walked around the mall. We went to the Reston Town Center skating rink. Kids these days
I
don't
know.
even know, Amy.
No,
They
they
don't even know.
don't. And
My gosh.
Ace of Base came on the um at the roller skating rink. It was like the
Yeah.
best day of your life.
The best day ever. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. I'm convinced that
It's
the
good
fact that
times.
we are similar in age and from the same area, we had to have run into each other.
I
When
probably
we're in like
parked
the
at your house
background.
for the fireworks.
You probably did. You probably did. I
It's
love this
probably
so
that
much.
person that was so like, whose car is this? It's mine.
I love it. Okay. Well, now that we've sufficiently discussed where we're from, and I interrupted you during your 101, so let's get back to it.
Well, I kind of started that. Who am I? What is this?
I love
Okay.
it.
So, I grew up in a suburb of DC, but I went to school at ACU as a Christian college in Texas. And that's where I was planning on graduating, coming home. But I met my husband, and he was like, you know how Texas people are, they don't leave. So we're here. And he was a country boy, but my compromise was we have to live in the city. So we're in the city in Texas. But I love it here. I wouldn't go back now, but I still have family there, so we visit. But we've been married. I got married at 21, so we're coming up on
Mm.
20 years of marriage, which is insane. And then we have a son and a daughter, 13 and 10. This is like life is crazy. We're talking about them going into middle school and high school next year. And
Yeah.
so that's blowing my mind. But anyways, so I went to school to become an art teacher, got to college and realized everybody's really good and got really intimidated and became a regular elementary teacher instead. And so basically I was kind of discouraged from some of my professors that it maybe this wasn't my career that I should be choosing. So that really kind of killed my artistic dream. They were real sweet about it, but it was more of like I wanted to I didn't want to give up on my dream of teaching, so I chose teaching over like going to graphic design or whatever. But I just kind of lost that passion to teach other people how to draw and didn't feel confident in my ability anymore. And so that really stunk because I stopped doing art for so long. And I was a teacher. I loved it. I was an elementary school teacher. And of course, I could do stick figures, and my kids thought I was the coolest. I was so good at drawing. And so my 7-year-olds really helped me with that self esteem in that area. But when I got pregnant, I wanted to be a stay at home mom. So I was a stay at home mom after a couple years, and I was going to go back to work when the kids went back to school. And I ended up getting really sick. And I can tell you more about that story another time. But I ended up getting really sick. And in this healing process, I kind of discovered the joy of art again. And so since the kids have been back at school, I actually haven't gone back to teaching. I created this whole business where I kind of use those lessons I've learned of how that time in my life grew my faith, and then how I use my learning styles and my art background and my education background to start sharing with people what I was teaching myself. Basically, I was taking these notes and showing people, hey, my faith is really struggling with what's going on. This is what I'm learning. Just wanted to share it. And it started resonating with so many people that years later now I've got a full-fledged business drawing stick figures, teaching people the Bible, and I love it. And you can see now I've got my art everywhere. And it's just one of those things that came with time for me to figure out what I wanted to do. And I love what I do. And I'm able to kind of use all those talents and those people and those places that God's put in my path to do a full-time business now.
No, I love that. I love stories like that where you go to college, or you are entering kind of a young adulthood with this idea of like, oh, this is this thing that I really love to do and I feel called to do. And for whatever reason, a door closes for that thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then when years later, God's like, I didn't give you those skills for nothing. I just
Yeah,
didn't want you to use them that way.
absolutely.
And it's interesting because, like, I relate so much to that, like, with all of my years of training in comedy and doing, kind of stuff in the, in the comedy world and getting just trained in public speaking and all that kind of stuff, that now I love to teach the Bible, and I love to get the opportunity to preach or to teach in various fashions. And so it's like, no, I'm not doing comedy, but like the skills that I developed over those
Yes.
years in how to tell a story and how to paint a visual picture for people. I mean, all of those skills in public speaking and comedy and improvisation have served me very well. And when it comes
Yes.
to when you're standing before people and you're holding the most important thing in your hand, which is the Bible, and you're trying to teach it to people in a way that they understand and relate to. Um, and so I love that God just took your love and your passion for art and used it in such a different way. So I want to kind of dig into that a little bit, is that, obviously this is something that a lot of people relate to, especially those that might be in our age category and sort of that, like, I don't want to say midlife because I don't think we're midlife.
No way, no way.
People might call us midlife. But people in there, especially as you've transitioned from young adulthood into full-fledged adulthood, whether you're in your late 20s or in your 30s or in your 40s or even in your 50s and 60s, and you kind of are in this, I don't know, limbo, or this place of you're not really sure what your calling is, what your how you're supposed to use your skills, especially if you're a Christian and you're trying to figure out, like, how do I use my passion or my my how I am really good at spreadsheets or whatever it is. Like, how do I use this for the glory of God? Like, walk us through that process of how you kind of came to the realization that your love of art and your skills in that area were not lost, that they were to be used for something.
Yeah, and I think, definitely something I can reflect on now is, like, I feel like this whole last year of turning 40, I didn't really dread it like people do. It was just kind of like, "Okay, I'm
I don't
40,
dread
whatever."
yeah, yeah,
But
I don't dread it.
when I finally turned it, it was almost like, I feel comfortable here. Like, you're
Mm,
past the 20-year-old of, like, the insecurity of everybody's opinion and trying to find people to date and make and like be yourself at the same time, but impress other people. And it's just a lot of news. You're trying a new job, all that insecurity. And then my 30s, I had that marriage and career established. And then I became a mom. And that was a whole nother world of insecurities and fears and things like that. And so it was also like I was trying to figure out what do I do where I'm not just a mom, and I know so many people relate to that. So I had like an Etsy shop, and then I was like, I'll take a writing course, and then I'll do these painting classes, and I'll do, but I was just kind of like, I had no direction. It was just kind of like, I've just felt very lost. And I felt like I had no energy besides being a mom, and with good reason. Little kids are a lot of work. And so as I got older, I kind of started realizing, and then I dealt with health issues. It kind of puts your priorities in their place of what's important. And my faith was important. Passing that legacy on to my kids so that they shared this faith too was important. And then it was like, well, how do I dig? How do I connect to God? And so all of the how do I make money? How do I help support, or how do I help support the family? How do I, all that kind of like went to the side and was like, I just need to work on my relationship with God, because
right,
I was such a low point in my life with health. And so when I kind of stripped away all the expectations, like what do other people think of me, and how am I going to make money, and how am I going to just all that. And it was just, you're allowed to sit here and just read your Bible. And then it was like,
right,
well, now I want to read my Bible and understand it. And before it was just like, you need to read your Bible and pray more, or you need to do this study because that's what we started in class, or it was for the first time where I was like, I want to open this and I want to understand it and I want to read it. And it had nothing to do with any of the skills I had built on. And so when I started reading it, I was highlighting and color coding and drawing things out and writing in journals. And like, I see this word over and over and over again. What is the connections I'm making? And I had been blogging kind of my health struggles and started sharing, hey, I just am really wanting to own my faith, and I've never understood how the Bible fit together it's out of chronological order, like it's grouped by genres. And I just figured out mapping out the chronological order so I can read it in order. And here's a little cheat sheet I made and like took a screenshot of it. And like people started commenting on it like crazy. And I was kind of embarrassed when I put it up. Like, duh, everybody probably is like, oh, cute, you just figured that out. And everybody was like, I didn't know it wasn't in chronological order, or, oh, this is so helpful. If I'd had this so and so. And I just realized all those little, and it was like, in my doodles, sorry, this is just for me. It's just like Moses with a stick figure,
Right.
and so there was no expectation. It was just, I was just talking to people and sharing my story. And this happened to be part of my story. And all of a sudden, it was like, there's a whole need for people to understand this too. It's not just me. And I was embarrassed about it because I'd grown up in the church my entire life. I'd gone to a Christian, I mean, I've been in youth group. I went to all this stuff. I went to a Christian college. I took Bible classes. And here I am, 35 years old, and I'm still like, I know the story of Jonah, but I have no idea how he fits in with anything else. Like, it's just like a collection of fairy tales to me almost. And I was like, how do I make it real? Like, if I know the Roman Empire existed in school, we talked about it. And I think that happened when, the New Testament, but I don't understand. So I just dug into it like a teacher and started figuring it out, started sharing things. And then I became more confident because other people were like, I didn't know that. And so then that made me feel more comfortable to share it. And then I realized as time went on, people said, if you would outline Book of James or so and so, I'll pay you for it. And so it just kind of
Right.
became this idea that people were like, what if you did Genesis all the way to Revelations? And I was like, you're crazy. And then people started being like, no, I would pay you money to do that. And I was like, seriously? So I started like releasing these one at a time. And it wasn't like one day God said to my soul, this is what you're going to do. And this is how everything's going to fit together. And that writing course that you took is going to go to your blogging, and that teaching is going to go to this. And the artist part is going to go. It didn't happen like that. It was all in hindsight. It was all just me taking the next step towards I don't know what. Right now, I just need to study my Bible. Right now, somebody emailed me, would you outline James for me? We're studying it. That would be great. And then I'll pay you $20 or whatever. And it's just like, it wasn't a plan until I saw, oh my gosh, God put every single one of those pieces in place. And now it's this one beautiful, cohesive thing. And that's when I began realizing like so many people are constantly like, what's my purpose? What's my calling? What's my next step? And I've tried to constantly encourage people like, you may not know until you've already gotten there. And then you're like,
Mhm.
you just have to take the next step because chances are God's not going to lay out that plan. And when you do see his plan laid out, it's going to be so much more beautiful than you realized it could be. So, in my long-winded way, God does this through so many people of my story, your story of I thought all this stuff I worked so hard for was a waste. And then it came back and served such a different and wonderful purpose I didn't see coming at all.
Yeah,
So,
that's such a good yeah, no, I think that's so good, and again, it's something that anybody really in probably any stage of I mean, even in young adulthood, but especially in adulthood, I just feel like the conversations that I have with people, I mean, this is such a common thing, but I wanna shift a little bit, like, we're just kinda turning down a road that you mentioned, and that's really the topic of biblical literacy, and before people listening, like, turn this off because 'cause they're like, "This is gonna be boring." I promise you it's not. Because this is something that I am super passionate about, and I have by no means arrived. I am on my own journey. That's part of why I'm in seminary. But I'm fascinated by this. And I think the thing that has been really interesting is, like, and as you know this, and as people know this, like it's not like I grew up in the church. So I've had, a much shorter amount of time to come to this realization of how little I knew about the Bible. But the amount of people that I talked to who grew up in the church, and this is not, I would say, by no means exhaustive, because like my husband grew up in the
yes.
church. and is incredibly knowledgeable when it comes to the Bible. He certainly also would say, like, he has not arrived and he learns new things all the time. But overall, like, he is generally very knowledgeable. However, like, I talk to many people, like you kind of alluded to, who have grown up in the church or have been a Christian for a long period of time and who are not biblically literate in any way, shape, or form. And they have not read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. They've cherry picked, verses here and there over the years. And so my question is sort of two-part here. And the first part is, why do you think we live in a time where we have the most access to resources than ever, and yet we have probably one of the most biblically illiterate generation of Christians ever? And I don't know if maybe that's right entirely, but that's kind of the sense that I get. I think in a lot of ways, anecdotally, I don't know how much actual research is done on
Yeah.
this. I'm sure there's some, but I think, again, I know Barna does a lot of research in this area. So one, that's sort of the first part is, why do you think we've gotten here? And two, why do you think it's so important to be biblically literate when it comes to personal and spiritual growth? So,
Yeah.
two-part question there.
Well, that's the thing is like there are people that did grow up in the church and are like, I get it, and I grew up in the church and I read my Bible and I journaled and I prayed and I knew the stories and I even went to Bible Bowl and like I won this little award when I was like in third grade of knowing doing the writing assignment for Luke. Like I knew it really well. So it wasn't that I didn't love the Bible and I didn't study it and it wasn't taught to me. But I really think it depends on how the curriculum. I mean, when it comes down to it as a teacher, you can have the same thing being taught in different ways. And some kids will be like, I don't get it. And other kids will be like, oh, I get it. And I think that is one of the things is whether you have a powerful curriculum or not of teaching the biblical literacy aspect of it. And when I say biblical literacy, I mean, you can understand not like the basics of what you believe theologically, but the actual story, like if you were retelling the story of Little Red Riding Hood, you could tell me the story in order. Tell me the characters, you could tell me the setting, you could tell me the impact that person's decision had on the other one. But I think that a lot of the lean away towards studying the Bible like that, and I've heard it growing up, I hear it as an adult too, is well, we don't want to study the Bible like a textbook. It's not a textbook.
Right.
And so I think that's partly too, is if you don't have a really a strong curriculum and if you are afraid of studying the Bible like that too, which I get. I don't believe the Bible is just another textbook. I do believe that it is different and the Bible still speaks to us today and it can give us insights and its word is alive and active. However, I teach people it's so important to know biblical literacy because that's how you discern
Mhm.
things. That's how you make decisions is based off the Bible. And I think a lot of us are stuck because we're getting really into these trendy speakers or these trendy authors, or we're listening to um, videos or shows or whatever that are just you're more consuming people's opinions. And even if they're talking about the Bible, it's hard to know what's true if you have nothing to measure it up against. And so I don't think a lot of people are getting on these platforms being like, I'm going to trick everybody. But I do feel like people get things twisted sometimes and you should be able to discern. So as a kid, my parents constantly told us, like, I want you to own your faith. I want you to question things. I want you to look them up for yourself. And I was always like what? Like I didn't understand. Like if the preacher said it's 100% truth, as a kid, that's
Right.
kind of how you're like, as you get older, you might be like, wait, I don't get that. And so as you get older, you start learning to discern things. And so a lot of us need that biblical literacy aspect to discern it based off the Bible, not off of what our parents said or what the pastor said or what the YouTuber said or whatever. And it's not that these people don't have great things to say, but if you truly believe the Bible is God's word, you need to be everything else needs to be secondary. And so when I was using the Bible as secondary resource, then my discernment piece was getting all mixed up. And so
Mm.
that's why I think it's so important for people to know that, and also for churches to acknowledge that you can study the Bible as a textbook while holding it in a higher esteem, and that it is a tool, and we're not worshiping the Bible either. There's that extreme from one end to the other. But I do feel like if you're trying to teach, one of my biggest pet peeves is when people will get up and be like, all right, we're going to talk about so and so, but it's really long, so just read it later, we'll talk about it now. And I'm like, why wouldn't you just read the passage that we're going to talk about? Because it's under the assumption, one, you'll read it later, which nobody will, or two, you've already read it. And so if you haven't read it, you feel intimidated by what's being said. So I am like, that's like my number one thing when I teach lessons and I study, I'm like, we're going to be talking about this chapter and we're going to read the entire chapter before we do it, because it's so important to read the Bible. I don't know how else to put it.
Yes, absolutely. It can obviously feel really overwhelming for people who,
Yes.
don't know where to start, whether they're brand new to their faith or they've been in church their entire lives. So for somebody who is like just starting on a journey into biblical literacy, where would you even recommend that they start?
Yeah, and that's kind of the people I serve. And that could be all the way from a new believer to somebody like me who is like, I'm too afraid to say, I don't know who you're talking about,
Mhm.
because you've been in it. It's like when somebody's told you your name so many times, it's like, I can't ask what their name is now. And it's
Yeah.
like, there's so many Christians like that are like, I don't get this. And I'm just going to pretend like I do and say Jesus for all the answers. And it's like, that's not helpful. So that's who I cater to, is kind of, welcome to the overwhelm. It's totally fine. Let's work through this together. And
Mhm.
so I try to just be that encouraging voice and just be like, here's the tools I use. And you can purchase them already, you can watch my videos and I'll walk through them with you. So I try to also cater to different learning styles, because that's another thing I feel like has kind of been the gap. It's like there's a traditional way to study your Bible and it doesn't resonate with a lot of people. Just turning the pages and flipping through them, I'm like, what did I just read? I don't know. Like, I have to highlight, I have to be active, I have to do some kind of kinesthetic visual thing so that I can retain what I'm learning. And so I try to tap into a lot of those different things where it's not changing what we're doing, but it's changing the approach to it. But basically, the very first place I always tell people to start is realize that your Bible is not in chronological order. And even if you don't read it in chronological order, to know what the chronological order is, so that when you think you're reading it in chronological order, you actually realize, oh, I'm not. Because if you read Genesis to Revelation, parts of it are, but majority of it isn't. And so I teach people, this is how it's put together. This is how you would put it together if it was like the beginning of time to Revelation. And I just help people in the simplest way to figure that out. And I've created cheat sheets that kind of take the basic overall characters, the genealogies, the storyline, so that if you are reading like Galatians and you're like, I don't know the storyline, you just flip to that page and says, okay, this is Paul. Paul lived during this year. He was after Jesus's time. Like, I kind of give you that whole setting. There's a place called Galatia. He's writing to people called Galatians. That's why it's called Galatians, and it's a letter to them. So I kind of try to break down the very basic things. So even if you don't understand how the whole story fits together, you can be like, okay, now I'm set in this visual, like you're starting a movie or whatever. You can see
Right.
where you're at. But I try to help people with that. But what I mostly try to help people with is not just take my word for it, and I'm another voice on Instagram or whatever, but here's how I came to this conclusion. Let me show you my methods so you can do them too. So that's what I'm trying to provide, those resources, while at the same time telling people, but don't just take my word for it. Open up your Bible. Here's how I found this. Here's how I want you to keep going.
Yeah.
And just bringing that alive to people with different styles of learning and get them passionate about it, instead of, I should do this because if I don't, I'm a bad person. Like, that's not motivation. You
Yeah.
want to
It's the
be
whole
in love
concept
with
of
it.
like teaching a man to fish versus like feeding him fish. What's the phrase? You
You could
teach a man to fish, feed him for life. Feed him,
You can give a man
taking
a fish. I don't know. It's too what day is this? I don't know. I sounded smart till you did that.
my husband is going to troll me so hard on that blender. Yeah, no, it's like feed a man, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to
Yes.
fish. That's it.
Feed him for a
Oh my
lifetime.
guys, when we're recording this, it's Monday morning after a lot of things. So it's, it's fine. We are we're thriving, not surviving.
We have makeup
Yes, that
on, our kids made it to school. Let's just count that as a win.
amen. No, I think that's so good. And again, such a great place to start because again, this is a journey. This is a journey of a lifetime. It is not something you are
Yes.
going to get overnight. And so I think that that's a big piece of this is just like understanding that the discipleship process, the sanctification process, the walk with God is going to be from now until you go hang out with him in heaven. Like
Yes.
it's just going to be that, but it's such an important piece of that is knowing and also knowing what you don't know and being okay with that.
Yeah. And just realizing a lot of people are just like, oh, this is just reserved for people going to seminary or people that are preaching. And
Right.
no, God made this word for everybody in every
Yes.
circumstance. And if you are the one going through a hard time, this Bible is going to be so encouraging to you. And so it's not that you can't understand pieces, but the depth of things that you understand when you start studying in this way, it's just going to become like I didn't understand how God could be good and allow terrible things to happen to me. And when I went through that, the biblical literacy heart started turning my heart to understand God is way more complicated than I thought he was. And that's a good thing because God is still good, or because God's allowing this and God's good, that still makes him good. And so, what does that mean? What am I going to do with this? And so, understanding who God was helped me get through some really hard times in my life. And so that's why I'm so passionate about just start, just start. You never know what's going to happen with this. And if you need somebody to help you along the way, I would love to. I've got a community of people, but to not be that person that sits there for 30 years going, I don't know who they're talking about. It's okay. A lot of us don't. And we're figuring it out together. And there's so much freedom in just having that relationship without any strings attached.
Yeah. Well, you've alluded to it a couple of times, and with the time that we have left, I do want to talk about you were diagnosed with late stage Lyme disease, and so I'd love for you to share kind of your story of how that your personal journey of being diagnosed with that, but how it has reshaped your perspective on life and your faith. And I know
Yeah.
that that's a loaded question.
It is, and I've got a couple notes here, and I'm gonna look at those so I don't like go off the rails on this. But yeah, that was a really big pivotal moment in my life. Is I had my son, he was probably 3, and then I got pregnant with my daughter. After I had her, I mean, I had back pain when I was pregnant. And after I had her, it just went on like breastfeeding was extremely painful. My back was in pain. I was just like, what's going on? Is this normal? And they were like, yeah, it's normal. But it just went on so long. They were like, yeah, that's not normal. So I went and got all these tests done. I went to the ER a couple times. I was having so much pain in my chest. It wasn't like heart, it was like muscle, but it was just stabbing, shooting pains, like nerve pains. I couldn't figure it out, and nobody could figure it out. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. I went to a rheumatologist. They were like, oh, I think you have fibromyalgia, which I found out was like, we can't find anything wrong. So it's called this. And so I still didn't have an answer. And then it got to the point where like the medicines I was taking was confusing those symptoms and adding to symptoms. So it took me about 2.5 years of just
Wow.
debilitating pain to the point that I was in a wheelchair. And I was going to all these different doctors. I had like a bajillion different doctors, and they all had a different plan. Everybody was an idiot and they had the answer. And so I was just so confused. Like, what is going on? And so, I've got a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old, and my husband had to get a nanny to take care of the kids, take care of me. I couldn't get to the bathroom on my own. And it was just terrifying because I either got, here's 10 more medications to try. This will fix it. I promise you won't leave here without us helping you. And then it never helped. Or I would get, well, you're taking so much medication and we can't figure out the answer. So we're going to send a psychiatrist down here. And so it
Mm,
was just like to the point that I was like, nobody's helping me. And my family, is trying what they can. Well, you should try this. You should try this. Or I'm going to say this and this will encourage you, when really it just pissed me off or whatever. So it was just, I
yeah.
was angry at everyone because I was like, you keep saying you're going to fix it. You're not doing anything. Or I don't want to hear that. Or don't ask me how I'm feeling. I still feel crappy. So it was just this, oh man, it was just awful because not only was I in the most pain I'd been in my entire life, I was having like seizures and twitching and all kinds of like crazy, embarrassing symptoms. And then I couldn't take care of my kids. And then just, it was like we have exhausted the medical system, natural all the way to, mainstream. We've done it all. And that was when I really was like, it's easier for me to believe that God doesn't exist than he would allow this to happen. And that's where I was at. And I was so depressed. And I know some of the medications I was on were messing with my thoughts too. And I had to, talk to doctors and be like, I'm having suicidal thoughts that I don't think are mine. I think it's medicine. Like and I was alert enough to know I don't think this is me. And so I did get the help and I did get the things adjusted, but I was just like, I've never been so down in my entire life. I've never been so questioning everything I've grown up in my entire life. And I just had that unsettling thought of like, well, maybe God's not real. And I knew that didn't settle well with me. And so I thought, well, if I believe he's good and I believe he's allowing this, then there's only one conclusion I can draw from that. And it's like, just because he's allowing it doesn't mean he's not good. So if he's still good, what does this mean? And so from there, that launched into, maybe I don't know God as well as I thought I did. I want to know him more. I want to know what's the purpose in this pain. And so instead of just being like, when can I sleep this off? How can I sleep this off? It became, how can I use this right now to keep going? Because it went on for so long. I was like, I don't know. I might be like this the rest of my life. So what am I going to do with this? And it just gave me that purpose to just take care of myself and stop just waiting for everybody to fix it, putting my trust in everybody else. And honestly, it gave my health back, focusing on my spiritual growth. And I don't necessarily say because I like prayed the special prayer or something,
Yeah.
but I think that God gives us wisdom that we don't have ears to see, and I mean, ears to hear and eyes to see, when we are so focused on being in control of fixing things. And when we give it over to Him, He gives us so much wisdom of what to do next and how to help ourselves. And that's when I dug into self care and actual, if I'm going to go spiritually, I need to understand the Bible more. And I started opening and I started doing all those things that take care of yourself. When I get angry, am I going to go throw stuff in the backyard, or am I going to, start up meditation or whatever it needs to be? So it's like, it was never an easy fix, but the only thing that did fix it was complete surrender to him and being like, I want to know you, Lord, because I know you're good. So I want something good to come out of this. And right now I don't struggle with any of that stuff. I mean, it's been, goodness, probably 3 years since I've had a bad flare up.
Mm,
And that happened. My daughter's 10 now. So that went on for a long time, but it slowly got better. And it's been one of those things that gives me compassion for people struggling with their faith instead of judgment. It's one of those things that gives me strength when I go through something new. It's like, I understand this struggle in a way that I didn't before. It's not an attack on me. God's not attacking me, but He is going to be here to help me through this. So I don't know exactly how to wrap that story up besides I'm in a really good place. I have a much deeper trust and faith in God. Um, and this is why I'm so passionate about biblical literacy, because I don't want people to wait until they get to a point like that they're like, okay, I need to figure this out. Figure it out. now. Make it a practice, make it a priority, and you don't have to follow the traditional rules. I write, I journal, I doodle in my Bible, and I own like 10 of them. Just get in the word however you want to do it, because if you're not going to do it for yourself, just do it for yourself. Because
Yeah.
you can't help others if you can't help yourself. And there's so much beauty in just meeting him in those pages, even if your physical is not better. Man, working on that spiritual health was a game changer, and it brings you so much more peace than just trying to have a doctor chase symptoms. Good grief.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anybody, I talk about this a lot, and just the reality is that anybody who's lived long enough is going to experience trials and suffering
Yep.
and pain and illness and loss, and it can be really hard to see God in those moments. But like you said, I mean, for me, like when I was going through when we lost our two babies and we were going through secondary infertility issues and just all kinds of things like that. Like that was actually the year that I had set out to read the Bible from cover to cover. And it was in those moments of like in my darkest moments when I'm reading Job,
Yeah.
and when I'm in my darkest moments and I'm reading, Genesis, and I'm seeing like how did God let this happen to Joseph? But, it wasn't until I really dug into it that I'm like, wait a second, it says that God was with him. God was with him.
Yeah.
And it says like God was with Joseph God was with Joseph God was with Joseph like still bad stuff happened,
Yeah.
but God was with him the whole time. And so it's that reminder of like you are not alone. God is with you.
And
But you
Jesus
have yeah,
didn't he didn't let Jesus not have to deal with that stuff. He
right.
took that on because he loves us.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just such an encouragement. And I know that for so many people who are listening, who have gone through that, are going through that, will go through that, like just that reminder of just remember that he is with you. And
Yes.
you just have to slow down long enough to be able to look for him, and to hear his voice. Amy, this has been so good. I would love for you to just share where people can connect with you, where they can find all those amazing stick figure resources, and just how they can, again, start their own journey for biblical literacy and all that.
Yeah, I want to keep it simple. I'm Amy Center, and so my website is amycenter.com. And probably the best way, honestly, to like figure out where my resources are, where my social is, just subscribe. If you go on amycenter.com, there will be a pop-up, or you can go /subscribe. But usually there's a pop-up to subscribe. I make it really easy. And I've got actually a free printable that is reading the chronological order of the New Testament this year. And so some people are like, well, what about what did I say? Old Testament. I don't know what I said.
You
The
said New
Old
Testament.
Testament.
Yeah.
The Old Testament this year. I got ahead of myself in my thoughts. Woo! Okay, creative people, scatterbrain. But I organize
All
it
right.
for you in chronological order, the Old Testament for 2025, and then we'll do the New Testament next year. But that's a
Awesome.
totally free resource. And I don't have it where it's like some of these studies are like day one, read this. It's just a general read this in this month so that you can read it in chunks, however you want. All my stuff's super flexible, very structured. I think you'll really enjoy it. And then I have free lessons on YouTube where I teach a method I call the simple method, and that stands for all these things. And I walk you through them. So much fun stuff. We're goofy, we're serious, we're all the things. But Amy Center, I'll get you hooked up if you subscribe over there.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for being here, Amy. You're awesome.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you having me on here.